Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all having a great week and are excited to hear us today. We are going to be talking about leadership lessons from the Army. And I have with me two great Army men who are going to talk about these lessons. We have with us Lieutenant General Syed Hassain retired. It's a pleasure having you, sir, with us. He is a former commander from Srinagar, based 15 Corps, now the Chancellor at Central University of Kashmir. And Brigadier Sushil Bhasin is the military leadership coach, keynote speaker, and an author. Good evening, both of you. It is a pleasure having both of you here today.
Good
Good
evening and Jai
evening.
Hind.
Good
Jai Hind,
evening and
sir.
Jai Hind. I will personally like to thank General Ata Hasnain for being here. He's been such a good friend. The way he's so busy, and I know the type of schedule he follows. The very fact that he didn't even bat an eyelid to come on this show, I'm really, really grateful. Thank you so much, Ata, for that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And it goes without saying that our relationship goes back 44 years. So,
Yeah.
on the basis of a relationship which is 44 years old, how can you ever refuse your old mentor?
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Rajvi, let's continue.
Thank you so much, sir. 44 years is indeed a very long time, and it is so good to hear that you guys share such a long relationship. Starting with you, Atma Hassan, sir, whenever I've heard, looked, read about the army and the army leadership, it is a very challenging leadership. It seems like it's very challenging. It is heard as a very challenging one. So, what do you think? What makes it so challenging, and what makes it such a supreme leadership in today's world?
See, Rajmi, in every domain of life, there are challenges. I'm not one of those who says that the challenges only exist in the world of the armed forces. No one can predict absolutely accurately as to what the next thing is going to be uh, in the domain one functions. But the level of unpredictability which exists in the armed forces, in the army in particular, is tremendous. And every step you take is a step towards uncertainty. For example, I mean, you are in operations on the line of control and you are going ahead. You don't know whether your next step can be on a mine, because there are old existing minefields everywhere. And if you're walking along the line of control, you don't know from where that mine may have rolled down in the last winter and probably come right in your path. So that can happen to you. And besides that, there are the plethora of situations which come up, the challenging situations which come up. The most important aspect is that this is the only profession which in which life is involved. In the sense, yes, you're prone to accidents in any other domain of life, in the domain of existence, but it is in the armed forces that you swear on your own constitution that you will go to the extent of giving up your life for the sake of the task and the sake of the nation. No other profession does this. And even this is an oath taken by every single man in uniform. That's what makes it different. That's how leadership. The moment you're dealing with life and death, the whole concept of leadership changes, and you start looking at things very, very differently. I will speak subsequently as we go along on the similarity between the corporate world and the Indian Armed Forces. There's no doubt that the corporate world has taken a lot from the armed forces. Today, we are taking a lot from the corporate world back in terms of lessons. But the one aspect which remains very common between us is the fact that both are risk-laden professions. Now, our risk is a very different risk. Our risk is all about life and death, about loss of a limb, about the failure of a task, a job, which could lead to a national embarrassment. It could lead to a personal embarrassment, of course. It could lead to a national embarrassment. And therefore, that aspect has to be kept uppermost in your mind at all times. For example, you can yesterday or day before yesterday, I saw Wing Commander, now Group Captain Abhinandan, on receiving his award, his Veer Chakra, from the President, the Honorable President of India, His Excellency the President of India. It was such a wonderful throwback to the period of February of 2019, when he was tasked to immediately intercept the aircraft which were coming in from Pakistan. This is post the Pulwama incident. If you remember, the Balakot attack had taken place the previous night. And he went in fearlessly. The task was there before him. He knew, and at one stage he also knew that there was a mismatch between his own aircraft, the equipment he was flying, and the equipment on the other side, what the Pakistanis were flying. It was just a coincidence that there was such a mismatch. It's not that Abhinandan came back to say, oh, there's a mismatch in equipment, I can't fly. Once you are airborne and once you are flying, once you are tasked, you just go ahead and do your job. Life or death is secondary in such situations. This kind of a thing doesn't emerge in any other profession. And that is why the profession of arms is a unique profession. Thank you.
I think when you talk about life and death, the two most important things, it just sums up everything. Bhasin sir, what are your views on this?
Actually, I just resonate with what General has said, and it's so true that this is one leadership where you're leading men into battle. And what, one has to wonder what makes these men continue going ahead, knowing that there is danger of death, but they never hesitate. Nobody ever comes back. They continue going ahead. And besides many other things that go towards the leadership qualities of leaders, it's also the organizational culture. The men in the army, they die for their paltan, the izzat of the paltan. And this izzat is not the Hindi dictionary word that you know of. When we talk of paltan ki izzat, uski kuch baat hi aur hai. And why are people prepared to die for it? Why are people prepared to die for the what's happened? Why are people prepared to die for the comrades, your leader, your paltan? That is the question that comes up, which makes us so unique.
I just have this interesting thought. We've all seen a lot of army movies, we've all heard a lot of army. I just want to ask you, this is a very personal thing that I feel. When you're leading a troop, when you know you have to step into the battlefield, and the moment you pass this line, you don't know you're going to return with one limb, two limb, you're going to return fine, or you're going to return, covered in tri flag. What is the first thought that you get? Just par that line as a leader. What is the thought that comes into your mind? Ki, now I've parred it, that this is it.
Are you asking me that question?
Sure, sir.
Okay, thank you. Well, yes, that's a very interesting question. Military men, firstly, are simply very ordinary people. They've just been taken from any walk of life. People who come to the NDA at the age of 16, 17, they are no super specialists. They just picked up from somewhere, were selected for certain qualities and brought in. And then the character is molded, their capabilities are honed up together completely to make them the perfect leader. Because they ultimately, what you're doing at NDA, IMA or OTA is creating leaders. They are the people who have to go in the field ultimately and lead men into battle. Now, you look at a case of someone like Vikram Batra. I hope you saw the recent film
Yes.
Shersha, right?
Yes.
I saw the movie and I reviewed it for rediff.com, and I got a call from the producers that they want me to have an interaction with Siddharth Malhotra. That was a great experience. It was great fun doing it. But in that discussion, we came out with these various aspects. You see, there's a very poignant scene in that when Vikram Batra is going in for the last assault, the second time. The first time he had come back alive. Second time when he was going in for the assault, he's got the option of telling his JCO, his subordinate, his junior commissioned officer, to go for that assault. Go in, knowing fully well that the JCO will die. He will die. He had that option to tell him. What did Vikram Batra do? He turned on to his Subedar Sahib and told him, Saab, you will not go. आपके बाल बच्चे हैं. You have children. You are married. I'm a bachelor. Right? And he picked up his weapon, his 2 grenades, and immediately went into the assault. Now, this is the ethos. This ethos is not taught. It is realized. It's realized. You see, when Vikram Batra had 2 years of service, 2 years of service, and those 2 years of service, and of course the background of training from the academy, etc., he had honed up a character in which he knew that the sense of honor is such. He can't go back home and face his troops tomorrow. No, he can't. If the troops find out that he was not an able enough leader, I'll give you a personal example. My unit in 1987, I belong to the Garhwal Rifles, 4 Garhwal Rifles. My unit was earmarked to go to Sri Lanka at the outset of the Sri Lanka operations. I was sitting very comfortably in Jaipur as the brigade major of a brigade. Jaipur is a lovely city, as it is today, and I had a year more to serve there. But something told me, my unit is going into operations. It's going to be battling the LTT there. Am I going to sit here on staff at this particular time? Tomorrow I have to command these troops. This unit is my parental unit. My father raised the unit. I said, can I go back to the unit and command it when I was not there in operations and the men needed me at that time? So the first thing I did was I put in my petition to the military secretary saying I may please be posted back to my unit. They were very surprised. They said, you still got 1 year to go and you're in a peace station. I said, very much. But this is my predicament. I cannot face my men tomorrow. It's a sense of honor, the pride of being in battle, being with them there. And I went back there. I went to join the unit. I can tell you, I served with my men with a sense of honor, with my head held high. And it gave me the advantage of intense leadership, the way the men could look up to me immediately. They knew that I had left behind a lot to come and join them. It was voluntarily done, right? So these are issues of the ethos. This ethos is never taught really. It is only realized through our very, very strong regimental system, which is very difficult to understand from the outside world, but it exists, and it exists very, very successfully in the Indian Army. Thank you.
You know, there's very interesting thing that he said about that where do men in the army come from? They come from the same villages, the same schools and colleges from where everyone else comes. And it is very, very intriguing to say that does the brother of the same soldier behave similarly in another environment? And the answer is generally no. The same siblings, born in the same family, brought up by the same parents, how do they behave differently? It is those ethos we are talking about. And that is where I come very strongly with an opinion of the organizational culture, where everyone is doing it. So therefore, because it's an environment where it's a tradition, it's a custom, and you see these things happening, you saw your seniors doing it, you make your juniors do it, it becomes a system, a family system, an organizational setup. So therefore, I have been talking about this to corporates about organizational culture. Do you have that organizational culture where people exhibit and build that character, that basic character that you need to lead people? Whether in war or in peace, whether in the army or in the corporate world, you do need that character, because character is the basic requirement of a leader.
You talk about the whole realization element. I don't think that, as stated out, any other profession has that. We're always told what to do in other professions. Rather, in army, we realize it ourselves. कि ये मेरी जिम्मेवारी है, मुझे करना है. I think it's a must that other professions slowly start realizing, rather than they have to be told that this is what you have to do. Moving ahead, we talked about
Just one
corporate.
minute, Rajvi, 1 minute. Ata, there is a question on the screen which comes from a Sri Lankan, and I
Okay.
don't know whether we should pend it for future, but I think it'll be better if it's answered now, uh,
Okay.
as it's relevant because you mentioned about IPKF, and that's what he wants to know.
Oh,
What
what were the
what is the
lessons you
question?
learned
Oh,
here?
I can read it. I can read it. I am
Yeah.
from
Okay.
and in Sri Lanka. What were the lessons you learned here through the IPKF time fighting against the LTT? Right, we'll keep this completely non-political. We'll keep this professional. Absolutely, right? We were there for a purpose. The Indian Army had the degree of difficulty of changing from a pure peacekeeping force. And you should understand what is the peacekeeping force. You don't carry your heavy weapons, you don't carry your tanks into battle, you don't carry your artillery. In fact, the degree of preparedness for peacekeeping is far, far lower, right? And you don't expect any responses from the people who you are involved with in peacekeeping. You are essentially a monitor, nothing else. In the case of the IPKF, I think on 26th of September, they were in negotiations with LTT and others, and on the 13th of October, they were in battle. They were in battle. In 16 days' time, they were in battle, right? And troops were being flown in from different parts of India. The way the response was, we took a beating in the beginning. I can tell you that because we were not prepared for it. We took a beating in the beginning. Lost a lot of soldiers. Very, very innovative tactics on the part of the LTT against us. But we learned our lessons. That's one thing in the army, in the armed forces, we always do. We learn our lessons very, very quickly. Obviously, it's a question of life and death, and you better learn your lessons. We learned our lessons very, very quickly. And it took us a couple of days to get into Jaffna. We captured Jaffna. And I can relate you a very nice anecdote to tell you the degree of importance we gave to these operations, right? When the operations were over and we were now fighting the second phase, that is the low intensity conflict, it was very important to control Jaffna, to have an administration in Jaffna. No one in the army had any experience of doing administration of a city. And we asked for civil administrators. We were not given any at that particular time. But we decided to appoint a brigadier as an administrator. They selected a brigadier, and how it was selected is a great learning in that. This gentleman was called Risky Kalon. I am sure Brigadier Bhasin would have heard of him and knows him very well. Risky Kalon, who rose to be the MGO of the army. His son is a major general today in the army as a CI army in the Staff College, Wellington today. Risky Kalon was known for his character that he can get anything done by persuasion, simple persuasion. So when General Sundarji was losing his temper in the military operations ops room, and saying that you need to find a man who can go and do this job, someone said, so what about Risky Kalon? He said, yes, that's the guy. And where is he? So he was doing a NDC at that time, a course in Delhi, and playing golf at the DSOI golf course, the army golf course. And a message came to him at 5:30 in the evening. Pack your bags up, and tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, you will be in Jaffna. And he was appointed the town commandant of Jaffna, an appointment we had never heard of in our lives before. You see the degree of flexibility which was required to be in these kind of operations. And I can tell you, Risky Kalon flew out next day, took over control of Jaffna. How and what he did, I don't know how he did it. But amazing, he turned this whole situation around. Now, Risky Kalon was the kind of man, leadership example, Risky Kalon was the kind of man who could do jhappi maar with anyone. You just get into a hug with someone and tell him, you are the greatest guy, and the work is done. That's what is required to be done. And it's not necessary in the army to always use your AK-47, bring it out and start firing it But that's not our only instrument and weapon. Our weapon is the brain. Our weapon is our initiative. Our weapon is our flexibility and ability to read the situation as it is required to be read. I hope I've been able to give you some lessons from my experience of Sri Lanka.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And you're so right, because these are the weapons. People think that you're always, fighting a war with your weapons, but it is more of the brain work. The psychology works more than anything else.
I think we're breaking a big myth here that it's not always, guns and tanks and bombs in our hands. It's also our brain that we're just using. We're just talking to people and persuading people to do a lot of things. Moving on to
If I may
corporate.
be permitted,
Yes, sir.
Perry, let's take a cue from this. Maybe I can speak about one other concept of military leadership, which
Sure,
our
sir.
viewers may find it very interesting. So, Rajvi, I will talk about a thing called scholar warriorship. I'm taking this cue from the fact that a lot of people think that the army is only about bravado, about lots of physicality, and taking a weapon and jumping into battle and things like that. Remember, I'd like to remind people the basic principle of warfare given out by none other than Sun Tzu, who said, the famous Chinese philosopher, the great strategist, who said, you should win a war by not fighting a war. Which means that the least amount of violence, the least amount of losses, you should ultimately win the war. That is a smart general. A general who loses 100,000 troops to win a battle has done nothing great. He's not achieved anything great, right? The man who has done it with the minimum amount of resources employed, the minimum losses, is the general who's really capable. Now, where does this come from? This comes from your ability to think. And that is what an officer is paid for. A leader is paid for that. That's why I always used to tell my troops, my officers particularly, the younger officers also, I used to tell them in Kashmir or in Siachen or any other place we were serving in operational environment, I would tell them that if you pick up your weapon and start using it when 30 of your men are together and you are there and you are using your weapon like a Rambo, then you are as good as any of those 30 men. What is so different about you? You should be the man who should have your weapon with you strung on your back. And your head should be up when everyone's head is down. And you should be actually reading the battle and understanding where you need to fire and who must fire. It's not necessary for you to fire. That is leadership. Where does this come from? I'm talking at a lower level. Now at a higher level, you go much higher. You realize unless you are aware of the world around you, and for example, a leader at the highest level, unless you know about economics, unless you know about sociology, unless you know about history, unless you know geography very well, and this is a lot of people think that they go to NDA and that in NDA there will be no studies. This is what lots of people think, that they go to NDA, there will be no study. Let me tell you, for 40 years, I was only studying in the army, nothing else. Because knowledge is something which is unending. And knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. So the more knowledge you have, the better is your capability to analyze, read the situation, give solutions, and finally lead your men into battle. So it's very important to be a warrior. Very, very important to be a very good warrior. Physically fit, very good in the use of your weapons, etc., in the use of tactics, etc. But at the same time, an officer has to be a scholar. So that is why a complete officer, leader in the army is he who is a scholar warrior. Thank you.
Absolutely, and that sounds so good, because uh, it makes so much of sense that you cannot lead men in war or peace anywhere till you have that basic knowledge. That is the number one requirement. I would say next to character, the next thing is knowledge. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I think these are some key lessons that each one of our listeners and me I'll take home today. That you're always learning. There is no matter how high you reach in life, you're always learning a new lesson. Moving ahead to our corporate world in corporate sector.
I've got a very interesting comment by somebody. He says, my friend says, पढ़ेंगे नहीं तो लड़ेंगे कैसे?
Yeah, that is
He's
a
reinforcing. He's reinforcing exactly what we are saying.
Yeah.
पढ़ेंगे नहीं तो लड़ेंगे कैसे? लड़ना सिर्फ हाथ के साथ या हथियार के साथ नहीं है. लड़ना आधे वक्त जो है दिमाग से साथ.
and I think this is what people forget कि दिमाग से भी लड़ाई लड़ी जा सकती है सिर्फ व्यापार का यूज नहीं होता. So very interesting point that is brought up here. So how do you now think corporate world and the working professionals of today, what lessons from the military leadership aspect can they acquire in their worlds, and what are the benefits of working in such environment of a military leadership? Over to you, Hasnain sir.
Thank you. That's a good question, a fair question. And I would say that, in fact, everything we have spoken so far is actually applies to the corporate world equally. I mean, I can put it down under heads, for example, risk taking. Now, risk taking is very much a part of corporate leadership. Also, how much of a risk to take. You see, in the corporate world, you also have billions of dollars available, which are you are responsible for. There are lives you are responsible for. There are people who are working with you, right? It's not, there's a whole workforce which is working with you. So there has to be a very strong people orientation towards it. There has to be a scholarship, a capability of being scholars. You need not be focused only on your profession. For example, if you're an accountant, and a very high-profile accountant, you need not be only stuck on your accounts. I can tell you as an example today, interesting practical example. I am part of the NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, and I've got the financial advisor with me. He's a financial advisor. His work is finance. His work is an advice on finance. But I find that every second day he comes to my office and he wants to know more about what's happening in the world. Right? He talks about Pakistan, he talks about China, he talks about Afghanistan and the effects of that. How is this all going to affect India? Not just on the borders. How is it going to affect India's stability? How is it going to affect India's overall comprehensive national security? See, so in the corporate world, again, scholarship is so important. I still remember Mr. Ambani, Anil Ambani, coming to me in headquarters 15 Corps at Srinagar. And we had lots of discussions together, etc. I told him, have you ever had a presentation given to you on India's national security? He says, no. I said, okay, come. We'll. So we put him on a 45-minute presentation, which I personally gave him. And he says, this is an eye-opener. My God, I didn't realize that I, as an industrialist, right, as a corporate person, I'm actually contributing to India's national security. I said, absolutely. You are. Every one of you is contributing to India's national security. Why? What makes you think that me as a soldier, I am the only one contributing? Because you must remember that border security, you may be very strong on the borders, but you may be absolutely hollow in the rest of the country inside. So you're insecure completely. And that changed his mind completely. So you see, the corporate world has to be also made to realize that they are stakeholders. They are equal contributors in national security. And therefore, all that we are talking about is very much applicable to them. Initiatives, for example, the whole issue of initiative is such an amazing thing. Yes, sir.
I'll just intervene and say that when I was a chairman of an army school, I told the teachers that you are not just teachers, you are nation builders. And what General Hasnain is saying right now, saying very clearly, that everyone is responsible for nation building and is contributing to the nation's building, including security at all levels. And therefore, I think each one of us should take that ownership and realize that we all have a role to play.
Absolutely. I mean, I ditto that completely, sir. And this is something that all of us who have had experience in the armed forces must continue to pursue. So, there are not too many people. You see, one of the things that we have to realize, all our listeners, I'm sure they will agree with me, our strategic culture in India is not very strong, right? This has been a traditional thing where everyone thinks the national security is only border security and the only armed forces are responsible for security. Not realizing that everyone makes a difference to this entire thing. And therefore, what we can definitely do post our service in the armed forces, the thing which Brigadier Sushil Bhasin is doing, for example, take leadership training to the outside world. Why only the corporates? I would say take it to the education sector, as he said himself just said. Take it to the education sector. Take it to all different kinds of sectors, not only the corporate world alone. And your very, very rich lessons which you have learned in your life from your 40 years, 35, 40 years of frontline leadership with the men, bring that up to in front of the people to understand, recognize, and perhaps replicate in their organization. There isn't enough literature in our country on leadership today. There isn't enough. I would say one of the very, very strong aspects of leadership is mentorship. And I'm sure Brigadier Bhasin will agree with me. In the army, we don't follow it in a structured way anyway. But somehow or the other, it builds up. All of us have role models. Well, Brigadier Sushil Bhasin was my role model, let me tell you, at one stage in life, right? He was my instructor at the DNM, on the DNM course at the Army School of Mechanical Transport in Bangalore. Today, if someone asks me a question, where did you learn your public speaking? I claim I'm a reasonably good public speaker. And I say, well, I learned my public speaking at the Army School of Mechanical Transport. I started from there. My very first teaching practice was invigilated by Brigadier Bhasin, right? So this is such an important aspect. You recognize these mentors. I'm sorry for the cost of time. Let me give you a small example. I still remember when I took over the junior command wing of the Army War College. On the first day, two things which are very important from here, which I must bring out to you, to our listeners and our viewers. On the first day when I took over the wing, I asked my staff, how many prizes do you give in your course here? They said, one prize. I said, wonderful. This is such a great thing that for 425 officers, you give one prize. They said, yes. And I said, show me the prize. So they showed it to me. It was a half-bent trophy in which the best student's name was written on one side and taken back. So my first question was, how does an officer who's the judge, the best student of the course, how does he go and tell his wife and his children that he was the best student? No one had thought about it. No one had thought about it. So I said, okay, now listen to me, take out your notebook and here is my direction. From today, there will be 20 prizes in JC Wing. They said, so 20. I said, now that you have questioned me, I'm making it 30. And every time you question me, I will add 10. So they were wondering, what is this? I said, don't you understand that 425 officers are attending this course? All 425 are capable of winning a prize, provided that you make them capable of it, completely capable of it, and motivate them for that. So they wanted to know what kind of prizes. I said, here's, let's start noting down. The Special Merit Award, Best Blogger, Best Debater, Best Lady Officer, Best from Services. Till then, sir, the ASC used to tell me earlier, sir, what is the point of going for JC course? Because that's a course where we always come back with with the very famous royal grading. That's something which was changed in my time. You'll be happy to know that best students from the services were from the EME, ASC, Ordnance, and many of them got instructor grading. We changed the whole character of that place completely. But the more important thing which I was coming to, in the end of term ceremony, the end of course ceremony, one of the important ingredients which I included there, we brought it together, was that the entire DS body, the instructors, the teachers, came on the stage and the whole course stood up and gave a standing ovation. Why was this introduced? I told them this is basically because there's an Indian value thing system here. It's called the Guru Shikshak relationship. It's a relationship for life. You can see it here. You can see Brigadier Bhasin and me today, 44 years later. It's a relationship for life. Relationships in the army are meant for being in for life, not for a tenure, not for a minute, not for a day or 2 days. And it's a very, very important aspect of life, because this is what increases camaraderie, and this is what increases mentorship, because you continue to function with those people who are going along with you in service all these years. I've always been in touch with Brigadier Basi. You ask him, how many times have we talked to each other over the years in the last 44 years? Sorry for taking up so much time.
No, thank you very much. And I think you brought out some very, very pertinent points, and they really add to the overall perspective of leadership. Because somewhere, I think leadership gets taken as a very narrow view of just leading people, or how to, in a way, manage, lead, and all that. But there is something beyond that. And that is what we are talking about. And I had promised some of my friends, I said, today you will be listening to things which are not normally heard of, they're not normally written. You will find perspectives, like you found the scholar warrior. What a what a profound thought that has gone into, and not that it was not there, it is a matter of highlighting it, packaging it, so that people understand. See, I was telling him in a earlier conversation that when I went to India, why was I learning engineering drawing? I had nothing to do with engineering. I was doing foundry and cup. I've done uh, metal work and sheet. What is it called? Uh, Machine work. We have done machine work in a workshop, and I was used to wonder what is the army officer got to do with all this, and that is what he's talking about: knowledge. Military history, military geography, geography, military history. We had 14 odd subjects in NDA. Where was the need? The need was that you are getting into basics of leadership. I feel that if there's one cradle for leadership, that is NDA. And similar, whether it's OTA and all. But because I went to NDA, I say that the 3 years spent in NDA were probably, and I was one of them who thought that now I'll join the army and get rid of studies. And like what he said, we never got rid of studies till the day you left the army. Every course you're studying, and your studies carried on and on and on.
If I may add, sir, the aspect of knowledge, although we are doing an overkill on knowledge, no doubt, but I thought this example may be very good. We discussed it earlier too, sometime in our discussions. You remember Afghanistan? The Americans have been there were there for 20 years. They left on 31st of August this year. Fighting a kind of a very different kind of warfare. It was not a regular warfare, it was an irregular warfare, what is called fourth generation warfare, right? And it's a warfare in which people involvement is very, very high. It's like Kashmir, where there's a proxy war by Pakistan against us, involving the people. So when the people are involved, you got to look at the whole situation very differently. If you got only terrorists or only enemy involved, the army will only target them. It's very different. What I want to tell you is that it took 10 years for the Americans to realize, and that's an advanced, educated society, supposedly, right? It took them 10 years to realize in 2010-11 when they sent a very educated general, General Patriots, David Patriots, to Afghanistan. He realized that the Americans in 10 years had never even looked at the culture of Afghanistan. And that they were fighting a war without understanding the sensitivities of the people, of the leadership, of the army that they were training. And here they were present there in strength and just looking at this whole situation as something very different. Now that reminds me, therefore, when I went back to Kashmir, I remember as the Corps Commander, one of the things which I told...
Yes, I was going to ask you, I was going to ask you, General, that you are known in the army for bringing a lot of personalization when you were in Kashmir. And we really want to know some of those examples of how you did it there?
So that's it's a very thanks for that question. And there are lots and lots of things. Of course, one day I will put it down in a book. I've not been able to get time to write a book. I only write articles and strategic articles about Kashmir and China and Afghanistan and things like that. But yes, you see, one of the things when I landed up in Kashmir, I did ask a lot of my superiors, what is my aim? Why am I here? Brigadier Bhasin will agree with me that in the army, we don't do things without first establishing an aim. Surprisingly, in Kashmir, no one had established an aim. Kya kar rahe hain? What are we doing here? So someone told me, sir, kill maximum terrorists. I said, that is what I've been doing half my life. Now that I'm a corps commander, a 3-star general, you expect me to be killing terrorists. Tell me, what is my actual job? What is my task? No one could tell me. So I evolved my own task. I tasked myself. I said, my understanding is that my task here is to mainstream the state of Jammu and Kashmir to the rest of India. Politically, economically, socially, and most important, psychologically. When every Kashmiri feels that he's an Indian, and when every Kashmiri shakes hands with me and says, Jai Hind, that is the day I will celebrate my victory. And it's with that I started working. I realized we were doing a lot of good things. We were doing the right things. We were not packaging them correctly. And we were following age-old concepts. The concept was that in 89, when this whole problem started, we had to come in with a bang. And any army has to come in with a bang. And people will suffer, the civilians will suffer, the populace will suffer. It suffered. It did suffer. But in the year 2010, 22 years later, 21 years later, you don't have to repeat the same things you were doing in 1989, right? You have to change yourself. So if you were using 80% hard power at that time and just about 20% soft power, you now need to rebalance and start using 80% soft power, which means outreach to the people. Their terrorist strength has reduced. You are killing less terrorists also today. Now the outreach to the population has to begin. For example, most people in India don't know that the army has 43 goodwill schools in Kashmir, in Jammu and Kashmir. We run the best schooling system, the education system in Jammu and Kashmir. People are vying with each other to get an admission in those schools. Why? Because traditional efficiency of the Indian army, making sure that every single penny which is given for outreach, sadbhavana as it's called, is spent on the correct thing. And the last example, since this may extend, I would say, of maybe in initiative or thinking differently. I still remember that a lot of people told me, sir, the Kashmiris have a passion for sports, and they don't get organized sports in this state. I was happy to see that the sports department is very, very strong in Jammu and Kashmir. But somehow it needed an initiative to get things going. The World Cup had ended in 2011, World Cup cricket. The IPL had ended, and I was sitting at a bar when I was discussing with my officers about cricket. I'm a bit of a cricket buff myself. So someone said, sir, why don't we start a cricket tournament of our own? Next morning, I wanted to know who said it. We still don't know who said it. So I said, let's make this happen. And you'll be surprised, for 1.43 crore rupees, we got a tournament going for 3 months, in which initially there were 80 teams from one district which wanted to play. Now, what was the purpose of this? Number two things. Number one, we wanted to produce a Kashmiri player for the national team. Right? We did manage to produce one. But more importantly, it was to bring a sense of positivity in the environment. A state which is so obsessed with sports, and let me tell you, the girls and the women of Jammu and Kashmir are the greatest achievers in all different kinds of non-traditional sports all over the world. Now we've got a Kashmiri who's been selected for the Winter Olympics. First time that a man from India is going for Winter Olympics is a Kashmiri once again. So there's a great culture of sports in that state. Somehow no one had harnessed it. For 3 months we had people talking of cricket, cricket, cricket. Nothing else. It took away all the negativity, much of the negativity. The media was into it. And we were meeting people and talking about different teams like Baramulla Tigers and Anantnag Arsenal and things like that. See, the romanticization of a game. Nothing like it. This idea produced fantastic results. The unfortunate thing, I must say at the end, no continuity. We did it for 2 years, and the third year, no one could continue with it. That's a major lesson learned, sir. Start something and make sure that it continues.
Very good. Absolutely.
I think amazing words and amazing lessons there. I think, I would look at it as a diamond, and you took out the best of that diamond by scraping, you know, हीरे की तलाश कर दी आपने. And I think that is very important when people understand to achieve something good, you have to scrap sometimes, you have to
Absolutely.
scrap out the odd parts and get the best outside. I think two great leaders here with us today talking about great lessons, from their lives as an army person. It feels so good to listen to both of you. One major statement that is there in our lives is a leader made or born? What do you feel about this line, especially in the army? Is a leader made or is a leader born in the army?
Shall I
Hassan
take
sir.
that
See,
on?
yeah, I
Okay.
think let Brigadier
Naseem
Bhasin say
sir.
that
Okay,
first.
go ahead, sir.
You know why I said I I learned leadership from a scratch, absolutely from a scratch. And the first time I tasted leadership was when I was in a scenic school before I went to NDA, and I was made the house prefect. And while I was a house prefect, I was told, "Can you take over as a school prefect?" And I was literally shivering. I said, "How can I take on school prefectship when I am in class 9 and there are 10th, 11th, 12th classes also?" And I was told that you take over as vice prefect and then we'll see about prefecture. I went to my housemaster and I said, "I'm okay to be a house prefect, but not as a school prefect." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Sir, how will I control people who are senior to me?" And that time, Lal Bahadur Shastri was the prime minister. And he said, "Have you seen his size, his height? If he can command or he can lead a country, why can't you?" And I was just thrown into this leadership situation where I did have my challenges, and then went to NDA. And I think it was NDA that polished up the leadership in each one of us. And then it is a continuous process. It went on to IMA and then through your regimental life. So I think leaders are certainly made. Yes, there is a certain element of basic qualities, but I think they are learnable. It's absolutely, leadership is 100% a learnable skill, and anyone can learn it provided you are prepared to learn it. You have to be willing to learn it. So that is my take on. I've never agreed with anyone saying that leaders are born. There may be some people who are born where it becomes easier for you to learn, but not that all leaders have to be born.
I 100% endorse every word that you have said. And, we have got this system in the army where we have this leadership trait concept, where we look at the traits of various great leaders who have been there in the past. If you start looking at some foreign leaders, let's say, someone like Dwight Eisenhower, okay, if you go into his history, there will be incident and incident and incident, milestone after milestone, which would have actually changed his whole personality. Why his ability to lead, his own personality would have changed over a period of time based upon every experience. I can quote, I'm blessed with a memory. I can go back over the years, and from moment to moment I can see how I have changed. There's no question. On the line of control, sitting in command of 120 troops, dealing with them every day. For example, simple thing. If first of all, an officer does not eat until his men eat, right? That's a very, very simple thing. Otherwise, normally, elders eat first. So I'm the elder, or I'm the higher in status, so I get to eat first. No question. My men eat first. I must make sure my men are well fed, and then I will eat. It's a basic lesson. It emerges anywhere when we are there. if you are with a Sikh unit somewhere, it's amazing to see it. How when you're going on a patrol, how within minutes of when you take a break in the patrol, how within minutes your troops can produce a cup of tea for you.
Yes,
Out of minutes like that. And
I
because
was
they
in
are carrying it.
Sikkim.
Yes.
Yeah, I was in Sikkim and a second lieutenant. I just had about 2 months of service, and we were on a flank guard, which means we were not on the main axis. We were on a small footpath type of a thing, and we had a break. And the moment we had a break, within 2 minutes, a chap comes to me with a steaming hot cup of tea. And I said, "How did you make it?" And then I realized that some of these people were carrying a bucket. So in every section, there was one chap carrying a bucket on which there's a stove and a small kettle, and there's a lit stove and a kettle on top of it, and he's moving with it. The moment you halt somewhere, the hot water is ready, and they just prepare tea and give it to you in 2 minutes. I mean, it is out of the world, and all this what I'll go a step ahead, Ata, and sorry for interrupting you here. He's talking about how officers eat after the men. And do you know, Rajvi, and do you know, listeners and viewers, I'm from the ASC, and we also have animal transport. An animal transport driver who guides two animals or two mules, and when he reaches the harbor, the animal is firstly groomed, then fed, and then he goes and washes his hands and has his cup of tea. Never can a AT driver have his cup of tea or his food before feeding his animals. And once in a HR seminar, I had mentioned this when people were talking about HR. I said, I don't know how human that resource now is, because in our time, there was no word. This term HR is a later term. In the army, we used to call it man management. And I said, I have also known something called animal management. So we are the people who have been managing even animals, and we make sure that they are well looked after. So that is what it is.
You see, sir, absolutely, in the sense each incident that you are relating has made a difference to you in your life. That is why
Absolutely.
I am reinforcing this aspect that leadership, you have learned leadership over a period of time. You had basic ingredients of leadership in you, right? Which most of us have, but it's a question of honing them correctly. And it comes to the fore. Let me tell you, for example, if you are going on a highway and you come across an accident somewhere, I don't think there'll be a time when an army officer will not stop to make sure he renders assistance. Lots of people will avoid. Lots of people will avoid the complications which are involved in things like this. But you've heard hundreds of stories of our soldiers, the kind of assistance that they have rendered in the railways on journeys which take place. How, for example, someone troubling a woman somewhere, how a soldier has come to the assistance in each such cases. It makes us very, very proud. And each time this happens, I learn a lesson. It's a reinforcing lesson, right? That your value system has to be correct. The value system is the most important thing on which we live. The army lives on it. Yeah.
And I like to say one thing here before we go further. I must thank each one of you in the audience, the type of comments that are coming, the type of remarks which I'm also simultaneously putting it up on the screen. I think it's very, very encouraging. And thank you very much for all your attention. Thank you so much. Yeah, continue, Rajvi.
Thank you so much, sir. Yeah, I mean, these are small tidbits that you're sharing of your life and your learning lessons, which are adding so much value to each of our viewers, to me today. And thank you so much for that. Um, Talking about civilian life, talking about being a leader in daily life, what do you think are the core values that define a good leader outside the army world? Hasnain
Rajvi,
sir?
I lost you. I lost
Yeah.
your communication for 5 seconds, so you may have to repeat your question.
That's absolutely fine. So I just wanted to ask about the core ingredients of a good leader in civilian life, in day-to-day life today. What makes us a good leader, outside
Okay.
the whole army zone and the
And we
army
are
realization.
we are not looking at soldiers, we are not looking at corporate people, we are not looking at administrators, we are just looking at common people.
Common people,
And
yes.
leadership exists very much in citizenry, among the citizens of the nation. I would very strongly say, feel, in our nation, for example, one of the very, very important aspects is moral courage. This is a very theoretical thing to talk about, moral courage. But moral courage is something which teaches us to be honest. Primarily, a sense of integrity has to be high. For you have been given a job in which you are dealing with so many crores of rupees. The temptation is always there. This is an essential aspect to pass it down completely in the ranks and file of the people who work under you. That money which does not belong to you, you will not touch it. Right? This belongs to the nation. It belongs to the people of this country. It's meant for development purposes. It's meant for some other purposes. It's meant for welfare of the people. I will not touch one pie of that money which is not mine. So I think integrity is one of the very, very important ingredients of leadership, because that brings about that creates a role model. It creates a role model out of you. The moment in an organization you find one person at a reasonably senior level whose integrity is questionable, you will find the culture spreading. And this kind of a culture spreads very, very quickly. Let me tell you. Moral courage and physical. I'm not expecting physical courage from every single person among the citizenry, but I do expect one or two things. One is compassion. And it's a strange thing, these things are coming out of soldiers like us, right? Compassion. Compassion for your fellow beings, right? How good are you with people who work under you? How good are you with people who work in your house as your house staff, right? On a Diwali day, do you reward them? I hope you reward them, right? It's a culture I have always followed in my life. On every festival, I make sure people who are working with me are rewarded. It is expected, right? An understanding of a pat on the back. There's one thing which I always have remember someone telling me, try a thing called 10 handshakes a day, which essentially means shake hands of 10 people who don't expect you to shake hands with them.
Wow.
Don't expect you to shake hands. For example, you every morning when I go to my office, I make sure I don't shake hands every other day, but I make sure I thank the janitor, the lift man. I always thank him. I always thank the lady who takes the temperature from my head to see that I'm not suffering from COVID. Right? She's sitting there through the day, she's doing this job. I thank her, and many times I tell her, what a great job you're doing. Right? No job is too small. No job is too small. My runner, am I comfortable? If my runner of my office, if one day he doesn't come, I feel uncomfortable. He's the one who gives me lunch. Those are smaller elements of life. You have to put your hand on the back of someone else. Do you understand this whole aspect of creating that aspect in your personality, to make sure that you are grateful to people who are around you. We are always grateful to everyone who's a superior of ours, right? We love to go around them. The question is, how grateful are you to people who work under you? And that is something I learned in the army. I learned it in the army, and I think this is something which I would love to pass it down to our citizenry, that no one is too small for me, right? It's not what you do, it's not how much you earn. It's a very, very important aspect for me in my functioning. The last point on this, again, people friendliness, the people friendly operations. I find many times in the outside world, people who don't deal with too many subordinates, don't deal with too many colleagues, don't know how exactly to function with them. Or if you come into an environment in which you've got people suddenly under you, you've got people who are your colleagues, and you don't know really how to deal with them. The most important aspect is how to subdue your own importance. Subdue your own importance, because it's a great thing. People are talking about you, calling you whatever you are. But if you start talking about yourself everywhere, I can assure you it's a matter of few days that people will do respectfully. How do you put others on the pedestal and make sure that you speak about them? Yesterday, I had at very short notice, I had the Minister of Disaster Management from Sikkim visiting the National Disaster Management Authority. At 5 o'clock in the evening, day before yesterday, I called up my consultant on landslides and glacier problems. I told him tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, I want a presentation. So many slides. The issues should be done. I hope you can do it. He went back and did it. Perfect thing. There were mistakes here and there. Before I retired in the evening from office, I made sure an email was sent to him. I appreciate the extra effort you have done, the hard work you put in, the discomfort you must have gone through in your at home to be working for 2 to 3 hours to make this presentation. My great appreciation for you. You see, these small appreciations of life, people are very, very tardy in normally giving out these kind of compliments. Thank you.
I'll butt in here and say one or two things. One is, I totally agree, and we of course in the army get so many opportunities where we learn from each other and we see the effect of it. I was a DDST, uh, Deputy Director Supplies and Transport in Bareilly. It was the second last tenure of mine before I left the army, and I got an invitation card given to me personally by the person who used to clean our house, the Safai wala, the janitor. And he said, with his hands folded, "Sir, please bless my daughter. I know you can't come, but at least give us your blessings." I didn't say anything to him, but I surprised him by being there in the wedding of his daughter with my wife. Both me and my wife went with a small present. And for him, it turned out to be a very big gift, he said. But for us, it's a very small token cash award. He, till today, it is this matter is about 22 years old. Till today, this man rings me up at least once or twice a year and says, "Sir, you are the one who did this, blah blah." All small things. They get so noticed, they get so observed. And to them, it matters so much rather than doing it for your seniors and your peers, which of course you continue doing, but that's a part of life. This is something exceptional, and this is really, really what matters.
There's a very interesting statement by Colonel Aditya Singhal, who happens to be my old Jivan at Baramulla, who says a crew cooking on the tank. I think that this is a very, very good example where, a small body of people who share each other's lives, right? Sharing each other's lives. If you are in a tank, one person is a gunner, one person is a driver, one person is a commander. How these people come together to live their life together. And with extreme danger. They know that they're going into battle, right? They know they're going into battle, and the actions of each of them is going to ensure that the other lives and he himself lives.
Yeah.
How cooking, a simple thing like cooking, contributes to their understanding of each other. It's an amazing thing in the army. These small little things, how they make a difference. I still remember one of the things which I always enjoyed doing in my hectic schedule as a corps commander was to ring up different people at 1:30 at night. I would tell my exchange, give me a call to one officer, one commanding officer, one company commander, one JCO somewhere, two Havaldars somewhere, one rifleman somewhere, who had deployed anywhere in 15 Corps on the line of control. And I would ring up these people and they would get the shock of their life, right? And the first question I would ask that person was, when did you go on leave? And suddenly he was expecting that I'm going to ask some very professional thing like सामने दुश्मन है कि नहीं आ रहा है, terrorist है, how are you training? I asked him the most mundane thing, छुट्टी कब गए? So suddenly he wakes up and tells me about. And I said, and when did you eat fresh tomatoes last? Now, Brigadier Bhasin will appreciate that in high altitude terrain, lots of places, you don't get fresh tomatoes. You don't get fresh onions. ठीक है, ये सब tinned आता है, hard variety आती है, ये सब चीजें रखी हैं वहां पर. But if you ask a man at 1:30 at night about his wife and children, about his leave, about the food he eats, these are things which are going to get embedded in his mind. And he'll know that there is someone. My whole idea, what was it? My idea was to tell my men, if you are awake at 1:30 at night, if you are awake at 2 o'clock at night, on the line of control, I am equally awake behind you. I am equally in empathy with you. Because you are doing a very difficult task. And the last point on this issue, since it's related to some aspects of leadership, when a call at night comes to a division commander, brigade commander, corps commander at night, if it comes at 2:30, it can never be good news. It can never be good news. It will always be bad news. Right? Good news, always people wait till 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock to announce to you. Right? Bad news, they will tell you immediately, so that is off their shoulder completely. Right? So at 2:30 at night, when a call comes to me, this is the whole aspect of a leader in action. Right? If a call comes to me and in the deep winter with -8 degrees centigrade, I'm snug in my bed, the way I could answer is by picking up the phone and mentioning in that hello, a very, very bleak hello, which will not give any confidence to the man on the other side. Right? I made sure that this does not happen with me ever. Told my exchange, give me a call and stop. Give me 1 minute after that. I will pick up a glass of warm water from the thermos, drink that water, clear my throat. And then I will call back the exchange. Now the exchange will put me through. The man on the other side must get to know that I am in charge. Right? I am not here to listen to you. I am in charge. The moment you have blurted your first 2 sentences to me, I am the man in charge. I will tell you the directions now, what to do. Okay, if it's bad news. This is something which is very, very important in life to follow. Right? Bad news coming to you and you how to absorb those bad news and not fly off the handle. Many times bad news make you fly off the handle. Many commanders, many senior personalities do that. How to absorb it? How to be the block, the last wall on which it stops, and then giving a cool consideration and giving a decision to the people who are waiting for that decision. This is a very, very important aspect of military leadership.
That's another very, very important aspect is decision making. See, I think whether you are a leader in the armed forces or you are a leader in the corporate world or leader anywhere, could be in a school, for example. A teacher is a leader in the school. A principal is a leader in the school. Decision making is something which is a very inherent, important ingredient of leadership. And yeah, Ata, you could be telling us something about those very, very crucial decisions you took. We have been talking about them many times. So that could be interesting to tell them about decision making, which is so critical and crucial.
I still remember on the day I flew into the Siachen Glacier to take over my battalion. It was such a change of environment. I came from the United Nations in Africa, a completely different environment, and flew into Delhi, spent a few days in Delhi, and immediately went to Thois, and then my battalion was already at the glacier, and I landed up at the glacier. And the day I landed up, you go through the normal process of your blood pressure and this, that. In the afternoon, I got a call from a young officer, one of my young officers, and Lieutenant Hardeep Singh, I still remember. And he was from the ASC, sir, attached to my battalion for the duration of the glacier tenure. And he was at a very difficult post called Ashok. And he rang me up to welcome me. Very sweet, welcomed me. He said, sir, we never met, but I welcome you, sir. You are my commanding officer. I said, I'm going to come there. I'll walk up to Ashok. I'll make sure. He says, no, no, sir, it's a very difficult thing. Don't come here. I said, have a heart. I'm the commanding officer. I have to come to you. So, and we had this small talk. After 10 minutes, I get a call back from the Nayak at that post. And he tells me, Saab, company commander Saab or the platoon commander Saab, to P4 ho gaye. And what is P4? P4 in the military language in Siachen means he's no more. Died. Right? P4 because priority 4 for lifting. A person who's injured and can be lifted and be saved, his life can be saved, is priority 1. So he's called P1. But someone who's dead, he can't be saved. So his priority is the lowest, priority 4. So it's known as P4. So the P4 ho gaye. I said, what the hell, kya ho gaya? And then we came to know that as soon as he left my call, he went and he was helping his men collect water from snow. There's one place where they had put fresh, clean snow and was creating water from it. And he just put his head above the parapet wall, and a bullet from 4 kilometers. You can imagine this is what how destiny is. From 4 kilometers, a bullet came and hit him under the eye. And on the spot, he died. And his body fell on the other side of the parapet wall. Now the question was, that area came under tremendous fire. Tremendous fire. The question was, do we leave the body there? Because sending more men down, this is one aspect of military leadership which is always there, particularly for us infantrymen. Will you sacrifice more men to pick up an injured man? Will you sacrifice more men to pick up a body of a comrade? This is a very, very difficult decision in life, right? Because the common understanding in the army is we don't leave our dead behind. No, we can't leave our dead behind. Our dead have to be recovered. That's a basic premise that we work on. And this was the dilemma in my mind on the first day of my command. By the way, this is the first day of my command of my battalion, which is a parental battalion, right? A parental battalion, and first day of command. And I had to take this decision to tell them, wait, let the body be. Let's wait for the night. We'll see at night. Now, night came, and an unfortunate one of those evening nights when a full moon, absolutely full moon. And we had to take the risk. One of my fittest NCOs, we tied his legs and he went down with a rope from behind. We pushed him down. He is the one who brought the body of the officer up. And you can imagine the body was already with rigor mortis. Bringing it down from that post to a helipad was a job by itself. And the most grotesque kind of the worst situation was that at the end of the day, the body could not fit into the helicopter because it was rigor mortis. Now, these are the kind of problems that are unimaginable to people in the civil world. That a Siachen glacier at 19,000 feet, here is a body with rigor mortis which is not fitting into a helicopter. How do you send this body down? Right? What decisions were taken, I'm not going to state them here. But we managed to send the body down. And with my first day of command, unfortunately, it may be of interest to you to tell you that my first 3 days in command always have been catastrophic. Catastrophic. On the third day of my command of the brigade, one of my QRT vehicles went down the khad. Right? And I would have lost 6 men. It's just destiny that none of them they were injured, but none of them died. Right? And while I took over the division on the third day of my command, my vehicle almost went down 1,000 feet. Right? I was saved just by a small stone which somehow came in the way and prevented the gypsy from going beyond. Right? So these are great experiences of life, and reinforces that same thing, that leaders are not born. Leaders are made based upon these experiences of life, which you must never forget in your life. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, isn't it really hair-raising? You
Yeah.
get goosebumps when you listen to all this.
Exactly. I have goosebumps all around listening to Sir, listening to the entire story. When Sir was actually talking about 10 handshakes and, there's one thing that I've really picked up on. Sir remembers names. He remembers the name of the man who called him. He remembers the name of the person he called. And I think that is That itself is so rewarding. 20 years down the line, if someone remembers my name and says, Rajvi called me that day and this is the conversation we had, I think that will be rewarding to me. That this
So,
person remembers my name.
Rajvi, let me tell you, I was a subaltern. I was posted in Danapur, Bihar Regimental Center, and we got a Saberia commander also from the Bihar Regiment. I was on leave. I came back from leave, and we were in the mess. The Saberia commander came, so we all greeting him. So I also said, "Good morning, sir." And he shakes my hand and says, "Hello, how are you, Sushil?" I didn't have a name tag on. How does he know my name? He had done his homework. And as a subaltern, I realized what is the importance of remembering names.
Yeah.
And this has been my speciality also. I've never forgotten
Mhm.
people's names when I've served with them. And usually amazed people when they say, "So you remember my name?" Or
It does.
remember my children's name? The other day, I was on a call with a friend of mine who we sort of discovered he had served with me about 20 years earlier. And when I asked him how are his children, and I called them by their names, he said, "Sir, you remember my children's names?" That is the type of relationship we build, and it's a relationship which goes deep.
Deep,
That's
yes.
what we were talking about. Yeah.
I think one sir also mentioned about the 10 handshakes. The only two things that come into my mind is Munna Bhai in Jai Ho. How he just goes up and says Jadu ki Jappi and then the thank yous, the three thank yous of Jai Ho. I think if we all
I can
follow this,
let me tell you, Rajvi,
yes,
this
sir.
issue of Jadu ki Jappi. I give this example very often in public talks, many times. I tell them that when I visit a post, right, whether I'm walking up the post or whether I'm going by helicopter, one would get off from the helicopter. The first thing one did, and I hope this is an important lesson, I always made sure to check up tomorrow. I'm visiting 3 posts, 4 posts, okay. Now, which are the troops? These are the troops, okay. What are the names of the officers? All that homework you have done. Now you have to make sure that you have enough gifts in your helicopter. So if you're going up to Jat troops, I would like to take some ghee for them, right? If I'm going up to Punjabi troops, or even if I'm going to Gadwali troops, I would like to take a lot of pickles with me, right? So these packages are separately made. What would I do for the officer? For the officer, one plum cake each. That officer has not seen a plum cake for 1 year, let me tell you, right? One plum cake each. And the last 15 days newspapers, Indian Express, Times of India, Tribune, anything, 15 days newspapers made into bundles, 3 bundles. Do you realize the value of a newspaper at a post on the line of control? You don't see newspapers for 20 days at a time, perhaps, right? And here's something to read. My God, amazing. That officer, whatever you may say, he's with his men, he's a part of his men, he's part of his subunit, everything. At the end of the day, you got to remember the intellectual difference between the men and the officer, right? The officer is still reasonably isolated in terms of his ability to converse. He's with the men all the time. He will cook with them, he'll patrol with them and everything. But at the end of the day, he needs some space of his own. That's very important to recognize. And I always made sure reading material, newspapers, magazines, in the corps headquarters or div headquarters, a 20-day newspaper or magazine is going to make no difference to anyone. But here, it is gold. It is gold for that person. And this is such an important thing. The moment you get down from the helicopter, the first thing you do is don't shake hands. You call up that officer and say, "Come here." And you give him a jappi, right? Give him a solid back slap. That is the way. But that shows your passion for life. That shows to your men your appreciation in true life form. Right? This quietness with men, I'm sorry, this is the kind of leadership we always follow. Quietness with men doesn't work. You have to be reasonably boisterous. Your personality has to be like that. And the men must understand and get the confidence. This kind of confidence is contagious. It's contagious. They immediately creates a wonderful environment. At the same time, I have seen many senior commanders who come there and start abusing.
Yeah.
Right? There's negativity in the mind to come there and find fault. Why is this so? Why is this so? Why is this so? You go to a post professionally, you tell the officer whatever you have quietly. You don't have to make a tamasha out of telling the men. The men are looking up to you. You are their commander and you have come there. They can't hear a negative word from you. This is a very, very important aspect of leadership, I have always felt.
Which
This is
also, I think, in the corporate world, people must understand, because in the army it's quite emphasized, and in the corporate, I haven't seen this being talked about. That you praise in public and you admonish privately.
that is it.
Public public admonishment is not
Never.
acceptable.
That is it.
And these are some of the very basic things that are taught to us right from NDA days, and they grow with us. And of course, like what Ata is saying, that there are senior officers temperamentally, they'll come with fault finding and negativities and all. So there are some things which all leaders may not be doing. Some do, some don't. But there are some basics which have been ingrained into our customs, which almost everyone does. So that is where a leader becomes more effective, more popular, more obeyed, more respected, where he goes into those little nitty gritties that the general is talking about.
I
And
think
they
this is
are,
a very great lesson that you've mentioned
and
here
you
today
know
for
what?
us.
That is why I was saying on this call, we are not talking the general stuff which is given on Google. We are going to tell you things which are those little things that matter.
Yeah.
So one
I
of the
mean,
very important aspects I experienced, sorry, Rajvi, just very briefly,
go ahead,
one
sir. All
experience,
yours.
one experienced is the whole issue of personal requirements of a leader. When I say personal, is administrative requirements. You see, you may have any professional requirement. Your men, your officers will respect you and they will go to the last to ensure them. The unfortunate thing sometimes happens where there are personal requirements, preferences. I eat this, I drink this, right? I need flowers, I need fruits from so and so place. These are all peacetime, mostly peacetime, but it even happens in operational areas many times. This is something I forbade. I said, no one must know my preference. I will eat anything and everything that a subunit has to offer to me. I can appreciate a bowl of rice and dal as much as I can appreciate a good roasted chicken, right? So this building up of personality aspects, related to administration particularly, is something which it happens in every sphere of life, and it just must be discouraged, because this is something I can tell you, subordinates who do this also dislike it. They dislike it intensely, but they do it for the sake of doing it, because they think that the boss probably likes all this, right? So you have to keep yourself above board in these things completely, in your administrative aspects.
I mean, this is a very nice aspect that you've brought in front of us, and the whole idea of just appreciating someone. I remember in my household, whenever we had, big functions or anything, my birthdays or my brother's birthday, our grandparents used to do this. They used to appreciate the food maker or the one who set up everything right in front of the family. And if there was something like, usually क्या होता है खाने में कभी नमक ज्यादा हो जाता है कुछ भी होता है, they used to put a hand on their shoulder and take them aside and then tell them that खाने में ना थोड़ा नमक तेज था, अगली बार ये ध्यान रखियो. So I think these small little things that even we adapt to, we will also learn that okay, you can praise in the public, but when there's a mistake, take them to a side and then talk so that they don't feel bad and it does not come out in a very awkward way. I think that's a very nice and a very great lesson here said to us, So thank you so much, sir, for that. And it was
May I add one more to the same trait?
yes, sir, all yours.
The importance for a leader to be a good listener.
Yeah.
You see, mostly leaders have had great experience. They are very competent. they're competent in their field and they've acquired some other knowledge here and there. They have experience of traveling the world, perhaps. What leaders love to do is many times to speak about themselves and speak about their achievements and things like that. What is more important for the leader is to quietly listen. Now, let me, I'm not trying to make it political, but let me tell you, I had the occasion to meet the Prime Minister once, right? Prime Minister Modi once, because someone told him that he needs to listen to me on Kashmir, right? And I thought maybe he'll give me 7 minutes to listen to on Kashmir. He gave me 1 hour. He gave me 1 hour, which I was floored. I said, how the hell do I spend 1 hour with the Prime Minister of India, right? But you'll be shocked. The Prime Minister had no file on his table, right? He had no file on his table. He was immaculately dressed in an immaculately kept room. When I walked in there, I requested him, asked him what would he like to discuss. He says, everything. And when I started talking, I realized that it's not, mostly my experience with people in this world is, particularly achievers, is that after the fourth or fifth minute, they switch off and then they want to start talking themselves. Right? Most leaders do this. They have this urge to talk and tell the other man, see, I know it better than you. This is amazing. The Prime Minister did not speak for 45 minutes. And he was listening to everything I was speaking and he was jotting down small notes. After 45 minutes, we had a little break. We drank a glass of water and he started asking me pointed, small little questions. We discussed for 15 minutes and I came away. I'm sorry to say, a lot of people may think this is political, but I was impressed. Because no one has given me that kind of rapt attention. Even in my own organization, people have not listened to me in that manner, right? So I think this is a quality which is really, really required.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for that. Before we wrap up today's events, we have a couple of questions that have come in from our audience. We would like to take them on one by one. The first is from Colonel Aditya Singhal. How can we become a responsible citizen?
I think Brigadier Bhasin will answer that better.
Over to you, Bhasin, sir.
Because I've been more of an irresponsible citizen myself.
No, I think, as we said, that it is ownership at all levels where people have to understand that you are a part of the nation building process and you need to do that. Now, uh, let me take you back to a little incident. It was in Bangalore just before I left the army that I walked into the ICICI bank. There was something that one of those girls in the bank had done beautifully for me. And while I'm very critical and I'll go and complain if things are not good, I equally like to go and appreciate in an organization if something has been done very well. So I walked to the manager's cabin and she had a glass door and I was in uniform. The moment I approached the door, I realized that there was somebody sitting in the room. So I just took two steps back. There was a sofa outside. I sat down there, waited for my turn. And when my turn came, I just opened the door and I said, "Good morning, ma'am. May I come in?" And she said, "Before you say anything else, Brigadier, tell me, how is it that men in the army are so different? Nobody asks for permission. People just walk in. If I'm talking to somebody, they'll still come and say, 'Sir, ye check sign kar do.' They don't even have the patience. But you patiently waited there. And now when you come and you find my room is empty, you come and said, 'May I come in?' and wished me. Nobody does that. So when we sat down, she asked me another question. She said, 'How is it that men in the army lead and the followers listen to you? I'm also a leader, but nobody listens to me here. How do you do it?' And it got me thinking, what is it that in the army we all learn to be responsible, we learn to be good citizens, we learn to obey as much as we learn how to command. And that is what got me thinking. That is the time when I was just about leaving the army to start my own leadership camp. And then I started studying this. I started studying what is it that makes the army so different. So Basically, Aditya, what I will say is that whatever we are taught in the academy, remove the military aspects of it, but all the other character qualities that are taught to us in our OLQ, officer like qualities, is something that needs to be taught in schools. And before children go to schools, now the NEP 2020 has come. It's a beautiful document, it's a beautiful policy. People are very happy with it. I've done a training of 20 principals, and I heard each one of them say that that's one of the best things that happened. Somebody said, "Sir, we feel we are liberated." That's a beautiful policy come up. But one thing which I found missing, and I asked the chairman of this committee when I got a chance to do that, where are the parents in this policy? There is no place, because actual what Aditya is talking about, how to become a responsible citizen, it starts from home. If the parents would teach a child how to become more responsible, and then the school reinforces it, would be the only way that you can build it up. Otherwise, it's very difficult for a nation like ours, with the diversity of all types, for a nation like us to become a nation of responsible citizens. So this
If
has to
I
be a very, very deep and a long process, but it has to start from home, I feel.
if I may just add to that, while endorsing every word which has been spoken by Brigadier Basin, if I may add, the millennials of today are a different, they come from somewhere else. They come from Mars or wherever they is, right? So culture change, it has to happen. Society has to change. It is progressive. They are amazing, scientifically endowed completely. Their technical capability is so much higher than all of us. Intelligence, the ability to understand, comprehend something is so amazing. I wish, I wish that they could also just reflect upon the value system of which their parents underwent, right? The ability, politeness, basic politeness, right? Everyone is otherwise on, on some kind of system by which he's losing his cool at most times. I suppose society today is much more turbulent. The pressures are much higher and things like that. But if you just look back, your parents, their parents, perhaps far cooler. Their ability to take, adversities, all these kind of things, much higher. And if though that value system, I think we need to perhaps, Brigadier Basin, sir, we could look at one of these aspects of understanding what made the people of the 60s and the 70s also good leaders. What were those particular aspects which today need to appeal back to the young people, the youth today, very dynamic youth of today? We have to just harness them to the right direction, and they will themselves flower out and make great leaders. So I think that that's an aspect which we could always look for the future.
Yeah.
I think that's a,
And
that's a great point that's come in.
yeah, and Aditya himself said self-discipline. Yes, again, self-discipline is something which, it says self-discipline, but it comes when taught. You're
Yeah.
not born with self-discipline. So one has to, that being self-disciplined, being responsible, has to start right from your childhood.
The next great question that we have is, so talking about the value system, what actions or activities can we as veterans take to reduce or get rid of the plague corruption?
That's a very challenging question.
It's a
All
very
right.
challenging. Yeah.
Well, you see, it's not up to veterans themselves by themselves to take on the whole system by itself. But if they can act as role models, that would be the ideal thing. And as it is, army officers, veterans, the moment you are seen to be a veteran, there is a change of attitude of people towards you normally, right? Even on social media, I find people are much more respectful to you. A lot of people thank me for my service. I didn't even know the meaning of thank for your service. But I meet people publicly, unknown people, they thank me for my service. Wonderful. I mean, so wonderful to be a part of an organization for which you're being thanked for just being a part of that organization, right? So the veteran has got a role, a great role. One of the major things in this is the veteran cannot, for example, after 40 years, he can't say, I've switched off from there. Now I'm a different personality. You can't be that. You're wedded to it. You're wedded to the uniform. Your wife is wedded to the uniform. Your children are wedded to the uniform completely. And you have to therefore reflect. You have to project that image with which you have lived all these years. You have to project it out into the outside world. There is no black and white about this in terms of how to reduce corruption here, how to reduce corruption there. But people who are watching you and looking at you every day must understand that you have lived in a value system of a great kind. The kind of camaraderie that you have lived with, the kind of honesty, integrity that you have lived with. All this should be reflecting from your personality and your talk. Many of us in life have a habit of talking loosely. And we think that we are liberated after you are retired. Sorry, I find myself under greater encumbrances today than after my retirement. Because I feel, my God, everyone is looking at me. And I'm supposed to be an ambassador of my own organization. How can I be seen to be different in any way now? So you ought to be 10 times more careful. In the army, while you are in the army, you are within the army, you are within the cantonments and things like that. You are not seen that way. But here you are in society. You are living in condominiums. 4, 5, 6 army officers are there in most civil condominiums. People look up to you. You should be an absolute role model in those meetings that take place there. In most such places, you will find veterans will be appointed as RWA presidents and vice presidents and things like that. Make sure you handle your accounts meticulously there. Because everyone's eyes are on you and they expect that someone from the army has been appointed here. Now things are absolutely going to be tickety-boo. Don't let that image and that impression ever down. Thank you.
Yeah,
I think this is a very good.
I'd like to add something to Diljit. So, Diljit, what you said, I just say that wherever you are, in whatever capacity we are, in that little area of influence that we have, every veteran can play a beautiful role of setting an example of value systems, which is so contagious. So, if you can just set an example, and it could be a small area of influence, it could be a bigger area of influence, depending on what type of work are you doing. If you're sitting at home, absolutely retired, maybe a little lesser influence, but there is area of influence, and that is what you take charge of.
I think this is why, we have this thought process कि army है तो कुछ गलत नहीं होगा. It'll all be correct. It'll all be towards, the law, and there'll be no fault happening there. I think if we look up to that actually, and if the leaders, the army leaders, if they follow the correct path, I'm sure the 100,000 people following them would follow the same path. So it's all about leading from the front, maybe, being the first one to step up and say no, so that people behind you can say no.
It's all about correctness, because people perceive you to be correct. The whole projection of your profession is such that they don't expect you to go against the ethos of your profession itself, right? And that is how you act as a role model to them. You don't have to point out to them that, see, I am doing it correctly and you are doing it wrong. No, that's also not the right thing to do. There's a subtlety involved. In leadership, let me tell you, there's a subtlety always involved. You can't be brazen with people. You see, if you're brazen with people, no one is going to follow you. Particularly in the CV world, no one's going to follow you. You've got to be subtle, you've got to message correctly. Your communication strategy has to be correct, right? The ability to communicate has to be absolutely correct. Then you are respected and then you are followed. So I think we can wind up, sir, because I think it's getting fairly long now. And
there are some more questions, particularly this one came right in the beginning. And I told him that we'll come to you in the end. And he's got a couple of other questions, but Animesh, I think we'll take only one at the moment.
Is it true, sir, that there were instructions to kill Prabhakaran when he was going to meet two Indian officers, if I'm not wrong? Yeah.
To meet an Indian officer.
For talk under white flag, but the officer refused it and follows the ethics and code of white flag.
You see, being a veteran of Sri Lanka, it would look as if one would be very happy to bring one's own importance and say, I know everything. Let me tell you, I know nothing about this incident. Right? Let me be truthful about it. I know nothing about this incident. There is a very interesting photograph I came across on Google Images of Prabhakaran, Ambassador Dixit, and who was later on, if you remember, the National Security Advisor, and then and General Harkirat, who was the GOC 54 div, which was operating there. Three of them together on the 26th of September. A photograph, I think, in the mess of the artillery brigade or something like that. Now, after that, when things started breaking down, I don't know whether any tasking was done or not, but I can say this much, that I mean, we came many times very close to entering into Prabhakaran's camp. Many times we came close to entering into his camp and destroying his camp, perhaps. He may have escaped. But destroying his camp. But we were restricted from doing that. We were restricted from doing it. For number one, I would say primarily because there would have been a lot of casualties. The LTT is not like the Pakistan army or any other conventional army. The LTT's concept of mine laying was amazing. Okay, well, they believed in mines, and the mine, they had conceived a mine called the Johnny mine, which had 100 grams of explosive. Compared to the NMM-14, which the Indian Army uses anti-personnel mine, is 28 grams of explosive. 100 grams they had put inside it. It blew your leg to smithereens. Absolutely. So going in for these kind of operations was always not very cost effective. So I won't go beyond that, because one has served there with honor and lots of things that he has learned from there. But to talk about issues which you have no knowledge about, not my cup of tea.
Thank you so much, sir, for that. So thank you so much for our audience, for sticking with us. It's been long. It's been 1 hour and 41 minutes, and you're still here listening, commenting, asking questions, showering your love. That is amazing. Thank you so much for being here. I would now want to also thank Hasnain sir and Bhasin sir for being here and for sharing your amazing thoughts and values with us. It was a pleasure listening to both of you. So thank you so much, sir, and we look forward to listening to you both again.
Thank you, Ata, and again, Jai Hind, and thank you for coming. It's been a real great pleasure to have you, and it's really been very interesting too.
I have been watching. I've been reading some of the comments which have been coming in the comments and the chat box, in the comment chat box as such. They've been amazing. Thank you so much, our viewers and listeners. Thank you so much. We are here because of you. You are the ones who make this. And I wish to thank Brigadier Bhasin, because setting up a thing like this is not easy. It takes a lot of courage to be able to come out and put across a program like this. I hope that our discussion has been worthwhile for people who have viewed it and listened to it. I thank them all, and I thank you both, and thank you so much for anchoring this program so beautifully.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you
Jai
so much.
Hind to everyone.
Jai Hind, sir. Jai Hind.